Welcome to this presentation of the Greater Philadelphia chapter of the Association for Talent Development. This presentation, Your Team is Like a Jazz Band, Jam in Harmony, was presented on May 4th, 2016 by Dr. Michael Brenner, President of Right Chord Leadership, LLC, as part of the 5th Annual ATD-PHL Regional Learning and Development Conference held in Drexel Hill, PA. At first glance, jazz and organizational development may not seem to have much in common, but both are fundamentally about managing change, paradox, and relationships. Leveraging decades of his own jazz performance experience, Dr. Michael Brenner, with saxophone in tow, shares how viewing organizations as jazz ensembles opens new ways of thinking, engaging, and problem-solving. This is a new way to think about human systems, managing change, teamwork, performance, and collaboration. The vocabulary of jazz speaks to the mind, heart, and soul. Becoming versed in it can help practitioners better explain and describe organizational patterns, see options, and reach mutually agreeable solutions in an interdependent world. And now we present Dr. Michael Brenner.
Good morning, everyone. How are you today? Hello, hello. I know there were some other great speakers going on simultaneously, so I want to thank you for joining me for an hour or so for what I hope will be a rather entertaining and enlightening and eye-opening and stimulating 60 minutes or so. So thank you for that wonderful introduction, and welcome to Your Team as a Jazz Band, Jam in Harmony. Well, that's sort of an unusual topic. You don't hear that too often at talent development seminars and HR conferences, but I like to do things a little differently. And apparently you all do too, or you wouldn't be here this morning. So a little bit about myself real quick. What does Right Chord Leadership do? I've been in the learning and development space now for about 16 years. Our mission is very simple. We help leaders, teams, and organizations find their groove, get in sync, and work in harmony. And working at Right Chord Leadership allows me to blend my 30 years or so of professional musical experience, specifically in jazz, funk, rock, R&B, with my love and passion for learning and development and talent development. So that's what I do, and to that end, or speaking of which, how many of you know what this is, or these are? These are chords. These are chords. Anyone know what a chord is? Any musicians in the room, by the way? Anybody at all? What do you play? You also play saxophone. Okay, wonderful. So you know that a chord is what? What is a chord? Yeah, it's a series of notes played at the same time, simultaneously, right? And if you strum a guitar or play a piano, you'll hear a chord that can either be very harmonious, very pleasing to the ear, very beautiful. Sometimes, though, you play a chord, it sounds very dissonant, right? Very harsh to the ear. A couple years ago, I realized that this is actually a pretty cool metaphor for something else. Anyone have any ideas? What else kind of works together nicely sometimes and then sometimes not so much? Huh? Teams and people, right? So what I challenge my clients to think about, and what I'm going to challenge you today, ask yourself, what chords are you playing at work? Are they harmonious? Do people gravitate toward you because they want to work with you? You're a good team player, you're trustworthy, you're collaborative, or are the notes or chords you're playing at work shrill? When people see you or maybe someone you know at work coming down the hallway, oh boy, here comes Joe. Let's, no offense, Joe, where's Joe? I just randomly picked that name, Joe. That was, right? People scatter, go the other direction. Okay? So I base a lot of my philosophy on leadership and teams around this very simple concept. What chords are you playing at work? Now, teamwork has gotten a bit of a bad rap over the years, right? Maybe this one. That's true. Right. Maybe my favorite one here, ensuring that your hard work can always be ruined by someone else's incompetence. Right? Maybe you've been on some of the same teams I've been on, right? So all joking aside, teamwork is one of those words that we hear all the time, right? Teamwork, 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 and there's been so much written about teamwork. And so what we've done over the years is come up with some metaphors to help us gain some insight into what high-performance teams do, how they work. You may be familiar with these. We have the military metaphor, right? We have the team as symphony orchestra metaphor with the conductor as the leader. We have the teams doing some incredible feat metaphor, like climbing Mount Everest or some other grand achievement. And finally, one we're all familiar with, the sports metaphor. Teams are like a basketball team or a football team. Coaches go around the country making a lot of money talking about how we can learn from their experience coaching a football team, basketball team, hockey team. But over many, many years of researching teams and thinking about teams and teaching courses about teams, I've realized that there's one metaphor that I feel is particularly relevant to teams in the 21st century, in our chaotic, unpredictable business environment. And that is the team as a jazz band. Now, maybe I'm a little biased because I've been playing jazz for about 30 years, but I see very clear connections between the nature of playing jazz in a jazz band and the nature of teams in organizations today. And by the way, this is my jazz band, the Nines. And that's me over there behind the music stand because I didn't memorize the charts. So let's explore that a little bit, okay? Now, you don't have to be a musician, you don't even have to be a jazz fan necessarily to get something out of our conversation, hopefully. And so what I'm going to do through musical performance and some videos and some interactions is help you draw the connective tissue between jazz bands, which are all about exploration, experimentation, risk-taking, listening, trusting. And I think all of that stuff is incredibly relevant and germane to 21st century teams. So let's get into it a little bit. I think one of the things that truly distinguishes jazz music from other art forms is the nature of improvisation. Improvisation simply means making it up as you go along, right? Without any preconceived notions, no opportunity perhaps even to practice. You just get up there, and what comes out of your soul and your heart is what comes out. Now, rather than stand up here and talk about improvisation, I thought it'd be a heck of a lot more fun to engage you in an impromptu jam session, which will serve as a guidepost, if you will, for the discussion that follows. So did we do the yellow stickies? Okay, so we didn't do the yellow stickies. So what I'm going to ask instead is for 5 good-hearted volunteers to come on up and join me at the front. Don't all jump at once. I promise this is fun. Thank you. In the spirit of exploration and fun, come on up. That's 4, 5. Thank you, sir. Come on up. Okay, so this is how this is going to work. What's your name?
Corinne.
Corinne gets the spoons. That's for you. You are? Vicky gets the shakers. And you, sir? John gets this thing. That's for you. You're the one that wins everything every year, right? It's amazing. I remember her from all the previous years, all the prizes at the end of the day. She wins every time. We'll see if her streak continues today. So I'm going to give you the hand drum.
All right.
Okay? And finally, my buddy Joe. The tambourine, Mr. Tambourine Man. Okay? All right. Now, wouldn't you know it, on a day like this, I forgot my strap, so I had to kind of put something together here, which may or may not work. Let's see how we did. All right. So we're going to engage in a little impromptu jam session, and we'll see how it goes. Okay? Now, what I'd like you to do, Joe, is just start a beat. Okay, and keep it up. Patty? Right, now in an improvised jam session, we want to listen very carefully and adapt to what we hear around us, yes? So I want you to keep listening to what's happening around you. John? Great. Vicky? and Corinne. Now let's change it up, play something totally different. How they doing? All right. Not bad, not bad. All right, so, for being such good players, I have a little surprise for you. Let's get this mic back on here. What's that? Yeah, you got a record deal.
I wish.
Yeah, go ahead. It's my little gift for you for having the guts to come up. Thank you, thank you. Now, what we just experienced is really not a heck of a lot different from what jazz bands typically do, right? They didn't know what I was going to do. I didn't know what they were going to do. They laid a rhythmic foundation that I sort of rode over. So let's peel that back a little bit, because when we're talking about improvisation, we can go in multiple directions. But the part that I want to talk about today when it comes to improvisation has to do with this quote from Frank J. Barrett, who said, "A leader's job is to create the discrepancy and dissonance to trigger people to move away from habitual positions and repetitive patterns." And I think that's such an essential part of improvisation, and as it relates to organizations, because if you're not shaking up the habitual patterns on a regular basis, what you end up with is this. You end up with an organization of zombies who just get through the day doing their tasks without any passion or energy, and no organization can survive with a team of zombies. By the way, have you ever been in a room with one of these people? It's brutal, I tell you. Brutal. So I'm going to present to you 5 principles of jazz improvisation that you can start using immediately with your team. Number 1, inject surprise to engage people in new ways. So for example, if I was jamming along here in the key of C, what melody did I throw in there in the middle? Woody Woodpecker, right? Now, great jazz players do that all the time. They know thousands and thousands of songs. And they'll be jamming away, and then in the middle of the solo, they'll just throw in something like London Bridge or Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, or in my case, Woody Woodpecker, right? Now, when I started my career at QVC in learning and development, I used to hold team meetings, but I would never start the meeting with just, okay, what's everybody doing? What's everybody up to? I can't tell you how many meetings I went to that started that way. So I'd always start the meeting with a little brain teaser, a little piece of trivia, something happening in the news. It took 2 to 3 minutes, and you know what? Totally unexpected. I know for a fact that those meetings that started untraditionally, unconventionally, unexpectedly, were way more fruitful than the meetings that just started, okay, yeah, what's everybody up to? Inject the element of surprise. Number 2, use repetition. Use repetition. Oh yes, use repetition. Great jazz players use repetition all the time. I might play a simple little motif like this. Right? right? So the band's jamming behind me and I go, once, okay, twice, 3 times, getting louder each time, 5 times, right? Now, all of a sudden, everybody that's watching the basketball game on TV goes, what is it about repetition in the ear? What's the relationship? Catches what? Catches your attention. Great jazz players use repetition all the time because it builds tension in a positive way. You start going, yeah, you know, and he's just playing he or she's playing the rhythm over and over and over and over. It gets people's attention. How many of you know the author John Kotter, K-O-T-T-E-R? Great management author, expert. You know what he says? He says when you have to communicate a change in the organization, it's very, very common that people under-communicate by huge factors. Huge. Because you're at the top, the change effort is your world every day. So you make the assumption that everyone on the team, it's as important or as obvious to them as you think it is to you. So what he says is, think of all the communication mechanisms available to you at your organization and leverage each one creatively to get your message out. How? In different ways. If you always send emails, forget it. Try a handwritten letter. Try the company intranet. Try a phone call. Try a FaceTime. Get that message out in multiple ways. And then not just the same message with the same wording. Vary it up a little bit. Vary it up a little bit. So I might go, see how I just took that main theme and just kind of put a little variation on it? That's how you get people's attention. And in a previous life, I was in marketing and advertising. And I think it takes something like 8 or at least 8 touch points to make a sale with somebody because they're distracted by everything going on around them. Use repetition. See if I can get it out of my back pocket. Come on. Excuse me one moment, ladies and gentlemen. Great, now I just blacked out the whole thing. Note to self, do not put the clicker. Now I gotta call my assistant. This is gonna be very interesting, folks. No pictures. If this ends up in the National Enquirer, I will be. Thank you very much. That was a first. Thank you. My assistant, everybody. You got to go with the flow here, right? Number 3, accept the offer. In improvisation, when somebody plays something, how many of you do improvisational theater? Anybody? Okay, kind of the same thing, accept the offer. If somebody offers a musical idea, you embrace it, you accept it. You don't just go, I don't know what to do with that, I'm going to do my own thing. Right? So accepting the offer means whatever the other person puts on the table, whether in improvisational theater or improvisational music, you take it and you make something of it. And you let it take you in new directions and see what happens. It's the same thing on a team, folks. I've been doing this a long time, and I've seen so many potentially great ideas get stomped out at their origin because somebody used what I call a killer phrase. That'll never work here. We've done that before. We'll get a committee to look into it. Sure you will. Now, the first iteration, it may come out half-baked. But instead of looking for what's wrong with an idea, look for what's right with an idea. I learned that years ago. It has radically changed the way I think about the workplace. Accept the offer. Explore the possibilities. Yeah, it might seem a little sketchy the first time. Play with it. Explore it. Experiment. Ask what if. How might. You be surprised at what comes out of those conversations. Number 4, learn from other disciplines. Very, very important, especially in the world we live in, which is highly, highly segregated. They have divisions divided into departments, divided into teams, divided into sub-teams, divided into cubicles. Where do we go next? I have no idea. But the history of corporate America is what? Marginalizing, segmenting, separating. How can we learn from other disciplines? Very, very difficult. The great sax player John Coltrane, one of my heroes and one of the greatest sax players to ever live, listened to all his jazz heroes that came before him, but he didn't stop there. He listened to Indian music. He listened to Asian music. He listened to classical music. As a matter of fact, one of his most famous songs, My Favorite Things, is from what? The Sound of Music. The guy listened to the Sound of Music and created arguably one of the greatest jazz masterpieces in history. His interpretation of My Favorite Things. Same thing with teams, folks. If you're keeping your focus on the people on your team, you're going to miss out on all those wonderful perspectives and points of view that are readily available from where? Huh? Everywhere else, other teams. I know it sounds crazy to ask the marketing guy about sales. I know it's crazy to ask the sales guy about, merchandising. Do it anyway. Because somebody with fresh eyes can come to the problem, to challenge the situation and go, have you guys thought about this? And you're so deep in it, you go, no, that never occurred to us before. And finally, slow down to speed up. Jazz players are extremely good technically. They've learned all the scales, all the modes, and they can play really, really fast. But what if they played fast continuously? What if I just went... I mean, where do you go from there, right? You can be really technically proficient and you're playing at that high level, and eventually what's going to happen? The audience is going to get tired and you're going to get bored. So great jazz players play extremely fast, and then what do? They bring it back, they rein it in, right? They might do a really fast riff, and then they... Right? They slow down to speed up. Same thing on teams. I found this great piece of research here from a Harvard Business Review article. I'll let you read that. So, contrary to what we might think, go, 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 pedal to the metal, let's go rock and roll, blah, 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 is actually detrimental to our productivity by tremendous factors. Maybe you know that saying, sharpen the saw. Sometimes you got to step back and sharpen the saw. You know what that means? That fable, the guys try to cut down a tree with a dull saw. The other guy comes up and goes, what are you doing here? I'm trying to cut down this tree. Well, your saw is dull. I know, but I don't have time to sharpen it. I think it was from 7 Habits, if you ever read that book, right? Kind of goes with what Kelly was saying this morning. Got to step back sometimes, figure out what we're doing here as a team, focus on the purpose, the mission, get back to basics, so that what? When you get back in the game, operate at peak capacity. Okay? So, I'm going to give you a minute or so at your tables. This is going to be sort of the structure for the morning. How can you take these principles of improvisation and take them and help your team get to the next level of performance? How might you do that? Just take a minute at your table, because I want to present content, and then I want you to kind of absorb it and process it with your teammates. So go ahead at your table and have that conversation, please. All right. Now, normally I would love an opportunity to hear some of the things that came up on your table, but because we already have such a little bit of time, I'm going to trust that you were able to take some of those principles and at least have an initial conversation around what you can take and apply to your own team. So that was improvisation, the nature of improvisation, and some of my recommendations based on my experience. I'd like to now present my second topic of how your team is like a jazz band. And it has to do with the nature of mistakes. The nature of mistakes. And I'm going to play a video here. It's about a 3-minute video of a young, talented vibraphonist by the name of Stefan Harris. And he's going to talk about how he and his jazz band think about mistakes. And what he's going to say is, there ain't no such thing. And you're going, huh? Well, of course, Mike, there are mistakes. Maybe it's time we reframe our thinking around mistakes. So I'm going to play the video, and then I'm going to ask for responses. So I give you Stefan Harris.
The way I perceive a mistake when I'm on the bandstand, first of all, we don't really see it as a mistake. The only mistake lies in that I'm not able to perceive what it is that someone else did. Every mistake is an opportunity in jazz. So if something, it's hard to even describe what a funny note would be. So for example, if I played a color like we were playing in a palette that sounded like this. So if Christian played a note like playing F, see these are all right inside of the color palette. If you played an E, see these all lie right inside of this general emotional palette that we were painting. If you played an F sharp though, to most people's ear, they would perceive that as a mistake. So I'm going to show you, we're going to play just for a second, and we're going to play on this palette, and at some point, Christian will introduce this note. And we won't react to it. He'll introduce it for a second, and then I'll stop, I'll talk for a second. Ready? Well, no, let's see what happens. We play with this palette. So someone could conceptually perceive that as a mistake. And the only way that I would say it was a mistake is in that we didn't react to it. It was an opportunity that was missed. So it's unpredictable. We'll paint this palette again. He'll play it. I don't know how we'll react to it, but something will change. We'll all accept his ideas or not. So you see, he played this note. I ended up creating a melody out of it. The texture changed in the drums this time. It got a little bit more rhythmic, a little bit more intense in response to the way that I responded to it. So there is no mistake. The only mistake is if I'm not aware, if each individual musician is not aware and accepting enough of his fellow band member to incorporate the idea, and if we don't allow for creativity. So,
I think that's an incredibly powerful clip. And when I was first starting to play jazz, playing jazz radically changed my idea of what it meant to make a mistake. Now, I'm not here to say, like, you know, if you make a mistake, an accounting error, that loses your company $5 million, be like, well, that's okay, let's explore the possibility of that, you know? Right? That's what I mean. I'm not talking about egregious mistakes, right? But I'm talking about opportunities and reframing, okay, well, it didn't quite turn out the way we thought it might, but that is maybe a new door or a new avenue to explore together. It's a radically different conceptualization of mistakes than what we're kind of used to at work, right? So one of the things I want you to think about when you're thinking about your team is, how can we leverage mistakes? Or better yet, how can we rethink our very notion of what it means to make a mistake? I remember reading years ago, it was either in Built to Last or Good to Great or one of those books. How many of you remember Crystal Pepsi? If you're a child of the 80s, you remember Crystal Pepsi. Maybe it was the early 90s. There was a time for you young folk out there when everything was clear. Late 80s, early 90s. They had clear gasoline, they had clear soda, and Pepsi's foray into clear was clear Pepsi. It was basically the same crap without the coloring in it, right? And they had a Van Halen song for their commercial, Right Now. Anybody remember that? Right now, there's no tomorrow, right now, you know, and people drinking Crystal Pepsi and on the beach and having fun, and well, it bombed. Nobody bought Crystal Pepsi. And I remember reading in the book that the head of Pepsi at the time called in the R&D team. Get the R&D team in here pronto. When the sales numbers started to trickle in, right? Now, what would you naturally think if you were called in? Right? You start putting the picture of your wife or your husband in the box. You know, the kids' pictures come off the wall. So they went in, heads hung low. And you know what happened instead? What do you think might have happened? Any ideas? The CEO actually congratulated them for doing what? Taking a risk. Trying something new. Imagine that. Now, do you think that R&D team might be fired up to go out again and try something new and different? You better believe it. That story underscores the importance of reframing the nature of mistakes. So, on that note, no pun intended, how might Stefan's demonstration, remember he said the only mistake would be if we didn't what? If we didn't react, if we didn't explore, if we didn't see where it took us. Provocative. How might his demonstration and his thinking about what is a mistake change the way you typically think about mistakes on your team? Another food for thought slide. I'll give you a couple minutes to hash that out with your table mates. Go for it. All righty. It pains me to cut off robust conversation, but alas, I must. But hopefully it will perpetuate dialogue outside of this room. So, there's one concept left that I'd like to share with you, and it has to do with communication and this notion of charismatic connectors. Charismatic connectors. All right, you ready for this? You want to have some fun? Well, you'll notice some oddly shaped plastic tubes at your table, hopefully, if you're at a table with these so-called boom whackers. Yes, they are real things. And I've spread them out around the room. Now, there are a number of ways to play this instrument. One is by cracking the person on the head next to you, but I don't recommend that. Or maybe your own skull. You know, I've knocked some sense into myself over the years. But the preferred way is to just hit the palm of your hand. So why don't you try that? Yep. So you should get a nice resonant sound. Okay? Good. Excellent, excellent. Okay. So here's what we're going to do. You notice it goes C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. There's two C's. The big C and the little c, okay? Now, those of you with the big C, and you can look on the tube and it has a letter on it. Those of you with the big C, I'd like you to stand up. Okay. Now, on the count of 3, 1, 2, 3, I'd like you to play in unison.
That's a D.
Thank you. Everybody get that? On the count of 3, we're going to play in unison. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Very good. D's, stand up. Anyone with a D? Now what we're going to do is go 1, 2, 3, C, D. Nope, C's, stay up. That's all right, that's all right. I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, C's, D's. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Better. E's, stand up. Count of 3, C, D, E. 1, 2, 3. Oh. Oh. Hey, that reminds me of communication at some of the places I've worked. Let's see if we can tune it up. 1, 2, 3. All right. F's. Count of 3, C, D, E, F. 1, 2, 3. One more time. 1, 2, 3. Great. G's. C, D, E, F, G on the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. Faster. 1, 2, 3. Suddenly this became a scene out of that movie Whiplash, right? What did he say? Are you a slagger or a... I forget what he said. Let's try that again. 1, 2, 3. Ooh. We had a bum note somewhere. That's all right. A's. Count of 3. A, C, D, E, F, G, A. 1, 2, 3. Ooh. A little late to the party over here. See if we can get that nice and tight. 1, 2, 3. Need a little work. One more time. 1, 2, 3. Is that you, Cindy? Ugh. Cindy's the equivalent of that person at your work that never responds to emails, right? Everyone's just waiting for Cindy to do it. Okay. That's okay. I love Cindy. B's, B's. Now, let's say someone came in here and said, I'll give a crisp $100 bill if you can play it tightly and in time and coordinated. So the stakes just got much higher. Same deal. 1, 2, 3. Now, I know y'all can do better than that. Where are my B's? B's? Let's just try you guys by yourselves on the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. Oh. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Better. Let's start from the top. C, D, E, F, G, A, B. 1, 2, 3. Okay. And finally, my little C's. Little C's. We're going to run the octave. C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. Well, that should be C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. Something like that, okay? Y'all ready? 1, 2, 3. I think we can do better. Strive to be exceptional. 1, 2, 3. Again, 1, 2, 3. Faster, 1, 2, 3. Again, 1, 2, 3. Hey, you got it. Very good. Now you can play all kinds of stuff with these boom whackers. If I had more time, we would play, you know, Mozart's 27th Symphony and all kinds of stuff. But imagine that each of these boom whackers is a message or a piece of communication at work. It took us a little time to get coordinated, didn't it? So imagine at your organization how challenging it can be in a complex environment to communicate effectively. Well, I did a little research for you. Harvard Business Review, an article called The New Science of Building Great Teams. Fascinating. You know what they did at MIT? They created these badges and they put them literally onto people in the organizations in the sample group of this research. And these badges were able to generate 100 data points a minute in terms of what people were doing, where they were moving, their body movements, their movements around the organization, all tracked on this little chip. In fact, the data from these badges were so accurate that success, whether a team was successful or not, could be predicted simply by looking at the data without ever having to meet the people on the team. In other words, the researchers could just look at the data and go, that's a high-performance team. And I can tell that by the data having to do with their movements throughout the day. This team, not so much. Do you know that patterns of communication were the most important predictor of a team's success? What do I mean by patterns of communication? Check this out. This blew my mind. This notion of patterns of communication, how people were moving and communicating throughout the day, was as significant as all the other factors that were measured: individual intelligence, personality, skill, and here's the one that blew my mind: the substance of the discussions. Combined. The patterns of communication throughout the organization was more important than what people were actually talking about. What really predicted team success was what? The fact that what was going on? Interactions, interfacing, meetings, sharing of ideas. That people were interfacing not with screens, but with each other. And what the research showed is that these charismatic connectors played a key role. You know what a charismatic connector is? A charismatic connector is somebody who circulates actively, engaging people in short, high-energy sessions. They don't stay behind at their desk all day. They're moving, they're meeting, they're interfacing, they're interacting. They also are democratic with their time. They communicate with everyone equally. They make sure that everyone has a chance to contribute, that everyone's voice is heard. Not every idea is implemented or executed, but people feel that their contributions are being listened to. Charismatic connectors also listen as much as or more than they talk. And they're highly engaged with whomever they're speaking with. They're not, no. They're present, they're focused. Whoever they're interfacing with, that's who matters in that moment. And they give everything they have to that encounter. They're present. Someone once said, being present with another person is the greatest gift you can give them. I think that's so true. These so-called charismatic connectors connected teammates with one another and spread ideas around. Joe meet Jim, Sue meet Cheryl, bringing together disparate people from around the organization. And finally, we've talked about this, what else did they do? They sought ideas from outside the group. These charismatic connectors were absolutely essential to these high-performance teams. So my question is this, ladies and gentlemen. I'll give you about a minute, because I got the 10-minute sign. What are 3 ways, heck, I'll give you 2 ways. What are 2 or 3 ways you can enhance your role as a charismatic connector at work? Remember, the research showed that it's the patterns of communication That's even more important than the content of the conversation. It's the fact that people were interfacing, interacting, getting out of their desks, going off-site. How many of you have held an off-site in the last 6 months? Raise your hand. 3 people. It's a shame because we think of off-sites as, oh, we don't have time for that. Yeah, you got to make time for that because as Kelly said this morning, that's how you get re-energized, recharged. So, think about what it means to be a charismatic connector. Whatever team you happen to be working on, go for it. I'll give you a minute or 2 to think about that. And then we'll wrap this baby up. Okay, ladies and gentlemen. Once again, I hear a lot of vigorous conversation around this idea of patterns of communication and becoming a charismatic connector. I love that, charismatic connector. When I came across this research, I thought about how can I be a more charismatic connector, not only on behalf of my own company, but for my clients too. And we just saw that sort of played out with the boomwhackers, right? So before I sort of conclude formally, I want to ask, with the remaining 4 or 5 minutes, are there any questions that I can, yes?
We were talking about some of the challenges and opportunities of how you can be increase charismatic connections when you have teams that are multinational, or if you have teams in different states. You have more and more people now are, not all congregating in an office. What are your thoughts, or what have you seen work?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I've done some work around that because I get clients asking me how do I get a virtual team to behave like a team, right? As with so much of this stuff, I wish there was a magic formula that I could say, and you'd be like, oh, we hadn't thought about that, But it's really about how do you build synergy and a collaborative spirit amongst people who are in disparate parts of the world. So one of the things is obviously leveraging technology. I imagine you're doing that, right? So instead of everyone on the same platform, just kind of going over the business of the day or what people are working on, you leverage the technology to do some of the things that I talked about today in terms of actually building that team cohesion. So it might be, it'd be fun to think about what would be a team development exercise you could do over Skype or WebEx or whatever technology you use. So start thinking about the technology more expansively as more than just a tool to share what everyone's doing in their respective offices. That's important, but start to think about how can I leverage the technology in a way that actually builds that team cohesion together. And I can send you some stuff. We can connect afterwards because I can share some things I've done around that. Something else is, if there is an opportunity to actually bring the team in twice a year, 4 times a year, there's no substitute for that face-to-face interaction. And I know that the industry is moving toward e-learning and virtual, and I think there's a lot of good things to say about that, but I'm old school, baby. Right? I don't think there's anything that I've seen can match the dynamic of that face-to-face interaction with one another. So those are 2 quick things off the top of my head. I'm happy to share more with you. You're welcome. Any other questions? Or I was taught to say, what questions do you have? Not any more questions. My trainer would kick me. Anything? We have all day, folks, to chat, so. Yes, sir.
Can you share with us some ways that organizations and teams can take a pause, like effective ways to do that? And you mentioned like off-sites and doing things like that. Well, what else do you see? What else would you recommend?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it starts with embedding in the DNA of the team that it's okay to take a break. Because so many teams are operating under the assumption, and we heard Kelly this morning, right? The team, they want to take a break, but they just can't. Probably because the message from senior management hasn't been, it's okay, right? So I think it starts from the top. I think it starts from the leader's investment in saying, and understanding the research, and understanding that teams that, individuals that take a break every 90 minutes are remarkably more productive than those that don't. And I can send you that research. It's right at Harvard Business Review. So it starts with reframing our assumptions around what it means to take a break. I saw something, take a personal offsite. Because we often think about team offsites. So I love the idea, which I've been playing with, take a personal offsite. What might that look like? It could just be a brief, it's great when you do things as a team together, but of course teams are made up of individuals. So those opportunities for teams to take a break together are great, but that shouldn't preclude individuals from taking that personal offsite, which may look like a quick walk around outside on a nice day, or grab a quick cup of coffee. It doesn't take a lot to recharge the brain. It only takes a few minutes. Or go visit somebody, you know, but someone said this morning, you gotta have that trust on the team, right? Because if you have a team where Patty's taking her third break of the day, she never does anything around here. She leaves us, right? If you have that kind of team, then you gotta start with the trust building first. You have to be okay with Patty's taking a break, she probably deserves it. And next it'll be my turn. So we can talk about specific things that you can do, but I think it starts with the mental and emotional acceptance that it's okay to take a break, both at a team level and an individual level. And then start thinking of creative ways to do that.
Okay, Michael, that's that we are going to take a break.
Well, there's one more thing I want to do. One more minute. And that is, you all rock. Right? Now, if you place your business card in this basket up here, I will send you a free copy of this article that I wrote recently called What Can Leaders Learn from Musicians? And it sort of complements everything we've been through today. The basket is right up here. I'd love to connect with you. Let's keep the conversation going. And this is my information. Reach out. Let's make better teams and organizations together. And I look forward to connecting with you. Thanks so much for coming to my session, everybody.